All right, so let's get right into it. For months now, we've been watching a really interesting shift in the war in Ukraine. See, Kyiv is now taking the fight deep inside Russia, but they're not going after troops or tanks. No, they're aiming for something much bigger. The economic heart of Russia's entire war machine, its massive oil industry.
And that brings us to this central, almost unbelievable question. I mean, how can a country that is literally one of the biggest oil and gas producers on the entire planet suddenly have its own people lining up for fuel? It's a wild contradiction, and it really gets to the core of this whole new phase of the war. So let's first break down this paradox. You've got Russia, an energy superpower by any measure, right? Their exports are fueling economies all over the world. But back home, they're dealing with one of their worst fuel crises in years. It's creating some serious turmoil. And just look at this contrast. It really tells the whole story. On one side, Russia is the world's #2 exporter of diesel, a global giant. On the other side, you've got reports that half the gas stations in Crimea have just stopped selling gas because, well, they don't have any. It's a full-blown identity crisis playing out at the pump. So what in the world is causing all this chaos? Well, the answer lies in a new, really bold, and frankly, an increasingly effective military strategy from Ukraine. They've realized that sanctions haven't completely choked off Russia's oil money, so they've decided to take matters into their own hands. Since about last August, Ukraine has been systematically taking the war to Russia. And the strategy is crystal clear. Forget the front lines for a moment and hit the high-value assets that are bankrolling the whole conflict. We're talking about a targeted campaign of precision strikes aimed right at Russia's oil refineries. And we're not just talking about one or two hits here. The scale is pretty staggering. Since this all started, Ukrainian forces have hit at least 16 of Russia's 38 major oil refineries. And get this, some have been hit more than once. This is a sustained, deliberate campaign. The impact of these strikes, it's huge. Experts figure these attacks have knocked out over 1 million barrels per day of Russia's refining capacity. That is a massive chunk of the processed fuel that not only powers their military, but also makes them a ton of money abroad. And let's talk about the reach. This isn't just about hitting targets right across the border. One of the biggest strikes so far hit a plant way out in Bashkortostan. That's about 1,400 kilometers, or nearly 900 miles, from Ukraine. That shows an incredible leap in their technical abilities. So how are they pulling this off? This is the really impressive part. Ukraine isn't just using weapons they've been given. They're building their own, and they're getting really good at it. We're talking long-range drones and powerful cruise missiles, like this new Flamingo missile. It reportedly has a range of 2,000 kilometers and can carry a payload 10 times bigger than your average drone. Okay, so that's the high-level strategy, but what does it actually feel like for an ordinary Russian citizen on the ground? Because this campaign isn't just some number in a report. It's having a very real, very direct impact on daily life, causing shortages, crazy long lines, and prices to skyrocket. And this quote from a person in Moscow just says it all, doesn't it? I queued for about 40 minutes, and before that, for several days there was no petrol at any station. This is the direct result of those refinery strikes, trickling all the way down to everyday people just trying to get to work. And of course, when you have that kind of chaos at home, the Kremlin has to react. They've been forced to take some pretty drastic measures. To try and manage the crisis, they've straight up banned gasoline exports for months at a time. Now that keeps fuel at home, but it also cuts off a huge stream of cash that they desperately need for the war. But hold on, this is where the story gets a little more complicated. Because while this strategy is definitely causing a lot of pain and messing up the Russian economy, it's not exactly a knockout blow. It's more like a bleeding wound. And the reason for that comes down to the difference between two kinds of oil. So you have to understand, Ukraine is targeting the refineries. Those are the facilities that turn unprocessed crude oil into the really valuable stuff like gasoline and diesel. The actual oil wells themselves, where the raw crude comes out of the ground, those are still pumping away. And that distinction is absolutely key. And this chart right here, this is why that distinction is everything. Refined products like gasoline are worth way more on the world market, sometimes almost twice as much as raw crude oil. So by taking out Russia's ability to refine, Ukraine is forcing them to sell the cheaper, less profitable raw material. And what does Russia do in response? Exactly what you'd expect. They pivot. Since they can't refine and sell as much of that high-value fuel, they're just pumping out more of the cheap, unprocessed crude oil and selling it to countries like India and China, who are more than happy to refine it themselves. As expert Ben Aris puts it, this strategy isn't a silver bullet. It hurts, for sure. It cuts into Moscow's profits, it causes chaos at home, but it doesn't completely turn off the money tap. Russia can still make a massive amount of money just by selling more of its less valuable crude oil. So when you boil it all down, what are we looking at? Ukraine's strategy is designed to, quote, bleed Russia of money, to make this war more and more expensive and painful to keep fighting. It's become a high-stakes war of economic attrition. And the ultimate question that leaves us with is a really tough one. In this long, grinding conflict, who can take the economic pain longer?